Excellent. That leads right back to me. So I'll introduce myself. Hi, my name is Amanda Schaefer. I work in the product area with graduate school, and we are here with Kristen today. So I'm really excited to introduce her. Our host today is someone who brings both serious expertise and a genuine heart to everything that she does. Kristen is a senior human resource and business management leader with more than 25 years of experience transforming organizations in high stakes defense and federal environments. At DISA, she launched the agency's first remote work program, led its post-pandemic expansion, and spearheaded the cyber accepted service rollout across more than 5,500 positions. Her civilian workforce agility program was recognized as a top agency priority, earning her a director's coin. Beyond her federal career, Kristen is passionate about developing people. She currently designs and teaches HR and leadership curricula at the graduate school here, and she owns KC Consulting Solutions. She also co-founded Wise Productions and Wellness, where she channels her entrepreneurial spirit into community and well-being. Kristen is a prolific author of 5 books on spiritual and professional growth and has her latest Soul-Led Leadership is hitting shelves this summer. She also hosts the globally syndicated Surviving the Human Experience podcast on Dream Vision 7 Radio. She holds an MBA, a master's in HR management, and certifications as a NASM nutrition and wellness coach, Trinity Health coach, and biofield tuner, and she currently is working towards her holistic health practitioner credential. So please give Kristen a very warm welcome as she presents about the topic of leading through uncertainty today. So thank you all, and off to you, Kristen.
Thank you, Amanda. That was such a warm, welcoming introduction. And thank you to everyone that's here today. Thanks for joining. I know your time is valuable, and I want you to feel like this hour was worth it. So, whether you are a frontline supervisor, a mid level manager, or a senior leader, you're navigating one of the most genuinely challenging leadership environments in recent federal memory. And I don't say that to be dramatic, I say it because acknowledging that reality is actually where good leadership starts. So today is not about pretending that uncertainty goes away or giving you this magic formula. It's going to be about building your capacity to lead steadily through it for your team, your mission, and honestly for yourself too. So we have about 60 minutes together. I'm going to keep things moving. I'll build in moments for you to reflect and share. And I want you to walk away with at least one concrete thing that you can do differently this week. As Amanda mentioned, you can feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'll address them at the end, just because I think that's going to be easiest. So I'm not flipping back and forth between screens and we can keep things moving. But again, please feel free, to drop those questions in the chat and we'll get them addressed at the end. So let's talk about first what we're going to cover. So, the agenda for our conversation today, again, this is a webinar, it's not a training course. So, we're going to really have a nice conversation, and I'm going to share this roadmap for the hour that we'll spend together. So, we're going to start by making sure that we're all working from the same definition of uncertainty because it has some nuance that actually changes how you respond to it. Then we'll explore the core principles that keep leaders grounded when things feel unstable. From there, we will get practical. We'll talk about scenario planning, communication tactics, how to take care of your team and yourself, because that is super duper important and often overlooked. We'll look at some leaders who have navigated real turbulence well, and we'll close with steps that are specific to how you can start your week off and implement things that are going to be actionable and practicable. And then I'm going to weave in some polls and reflection moments throughout. So be sure to stay engaged. The polls will be popped up. They'll pop up on the screen. Shige's here to make sure that happens for us. And just go ahead and participate. And your experience and perspective are what's going to make this richer for everyone in this webinar. So please do play hard, go all out. Let's have some fun with this conversation today. All right, so first off, we're going to start with a poll. How uncertain is your work environment? So before we dive into the content, I want to take the temperature of everyone in the room. So, what I typically find when I ask this question to federal employees right now is that most people are somewhere between somewhat uncertain and quite uncertain, and meaningful numbers say extremely. So, if that's where you are, you're not alone, and this session is designed exactly for you. So, here's what's interesting about this data. Even people who rate themselves as not very uncertain usually have team members who are experiencing high uncertainty. So, no matter where you fall, this is okay. This is wherever you land. Everything we talk about today is going to be useful. So go ahead on that scale of 1 to 10. I want you to just go in and share how uncertain does your current work environment feel, 1 being the least and 10 being the greatest. So let's just go ahead and take a moment to go ahead and complete that poll, and then we'll see what we have going on here. And are you able to do it? I'm seeing the poll up. Are individuals able to respond to the poll? Okay, there we go. I'm seeing some responses. Yeah, right now 8 is in the lead with 23%. Okay. So we have a lot of people feeling like they're navigating uncertainty here. So this is perfect. This is exactly the conversation we want to be having. All right. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about understanding uncertainty in leadership. So, sources of uncertainty. Let's talk about where uncertainty actually comes from, because in the federal workplace, there are usually several sources hitting at once, and naming them helps. So, for example, economic volatility isn't just about the stock market. We hear that term, we honestly always think about stock market. But for you, it looks like continuing resolutions. It could be budget rescissions, hiring freezes, workforce actions, and the downstream effects of appropriations uncertainty on what your team can and can't plan for. Then there's technological disruption. This one's real and it's accelerating. Agencies are being asked to adopt AI tools, new platforms, and changed workflows faster than training often keeps up. And when the tools change faster than people's confidence, that creates anxieties and it creates a feeling of being very unsettled. And we're seeing that right now, right? There's just so much changing. You get used to one tool, and then next thing you know, we're already introducing new tools, and this process changes as a result. So it can get very convoluted. Then there are internal changes, things like reorganizations, leadership transitions, mission realignments, shifts between remote and in-person work. We just experienced big shifts in that area. These create day-to-day fog. So people don't know who their supervisor is going to be next quarter, whether their program's going to still exist. Are they coming to the office? Are they working from home? It can get very confusing very quickly. And the key insight here is that uncertainty is rarely one thing, it's layers. And understanding which type you're dealing with and what's driving it is the first step towards responding effectively rather than just reacting. So I want to just take a moment, and you don't need to respond to this right now, but just jot it down if you have a notebook next to you. Which of these feels the most prevalent for your team right now? I just want you to kind of sit with that topic and really just mull over, is it economic volatility that you're dealing with, or is it technological disruption? Are there internal changes happening? Or maybe it's a combination of, but I really want you to have an opportunity to identify the sources of uncertainty so that you're better postured to be able to address it. All right, so let's talk about understanding uncertainty in leadership. When we're talking about this, we're looking at the psychological and the organizational impacts. So let's talk about what uncertainty actually does to people, because this is where leadership makes a real difference. Here's the neuroscience in plain terms, because we can't talk about this topic without thinking about the physiological and the neurological impacts. So the brain cannot easily distinguish between an ambiguous memo about restructuring and an actual physical threat. Both activate the amygdala, your threat detector, and then as a result, the cortisol rises in the body. And then the prefrontal cortex, where your best thinking lives, takes a back seat. So your cognitive bandwidth actually narrows. This is where your body goes into fight or flight because it doesn't know if it's running from the saber-toothed tiger or if it's just simply addressing a day-to-day issue. It just identifies a threat and it automatically just throws the body into fight or flight. 9 times out of 10, people aren't even realizing that's what's happening. And this is why your normally collaborative, creative team starts acting differently during high uncertainty periods. They might become conflict prone, they could become risk averse, they could be slow to decide or disengaged. That's not bad attitude, that's biology. But oftentimes it gets confused with conduct or performance, when in actuality, it's almost like the person or individuals in the team feel frozen, right? Because they've had that shock to the system and they're not quite sure how to process it or how to move through it. They're just in that space where it's like, whoa, what is happening? And how am I going to navigate this space? So, at the organizational level, the effects end up compounding. So, what that looks like, we see innovation dropping as people default to survival mode, right? Because they're no longer in a space of creativity. They're in a space of, I just need to get from this point to the next, and I need to do that in a safe way. Collaboration ends up suffering as trust erodes, right? Because now all of a sudden you're in this space where you're like, I don't know if I trust it. I know something's happening. I'm not sure what's happening, when it's happening, or how it's happening. And the messages might be confusing, or there might be a lack of transparent communication. So, therefore, we start to see that trust factor breaking down. Decision making slows because people fear being wrong, right? So now, again, thinking back to our conversation here, when you're in survival mode, the goal is not to put yourself out there. It's not to put your neck on the line or to stick out and try to, offer great, wonderful, out of the box solutions, because now you're worried about being wrong. So when you're doing that decision making, you're being much more cautious, you're playing on the safe side. And then the rumor mills start to fill, right? So any information that comes out, the rumor mill fills any information vacuums. So if there's an absence of information, oh my gosh, people are going to make up the story. And if they make up the story, it's always going to be worse than the actual story. That's just how human nature operates. So we want to be careful about that and being able to get ahead of the rumor mill before it actually starts filling with all of the wild stories. And then understanding that this changes how you lead, right? Instead of frustration when your team seems stuck, you can respond with curiosity and intention. So when you're looking at it differently, you're less reactive, you're being more thoughtful, right? You're employing some of that emotional intelligence, you're able to really step back and see things for what they are versus allowing patterns and triggers to really pull you in and get you fired up. Because your job is to interrupt the threat response, right? As that uncertainty is coming in and people are moving into that survival mode, we want to be able to diffuse the situation in a way that allows people to move forward with confidence and to be able to function even in environments where it feels like things are completely out of control. So that's what we're going to jump into next. So let's talk about understanding uncertainty in leadership, because that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? So looking at risk, looking at ambiguity and true uncertainty. So not all uncertainty is the same, and this distinction is genuinely useful in your day-to-day leadership. Risk is the type we're most comfortable with. You don't know the outcome, but you can estimate the probabilities. So things like budget scenarios, staffing projections, these have enough data to reason through. Ambiguity is a bit harder. You're missing key information, there's multiple interpretations that are possible, and you genuinely can't calculate the odds. So a lot of reorganization announcements live here. You know something's changing, but the shape of it isn't clear. I've seen it time and time again. Everyone's confused. There's chaos. You know that you might be reporting to somebody else. You're not sure who that person is. Now, all of a sudden, performance elements might change, expectations might change. Maybe the functions and missions of the work you're performing change, the project or program might change. And all of a sudden, it creates this shaky, unstable ground. So there can be a lot of ambiguity in that process. And then there's true uncertainty. This is sometimes called deep uncertainty. And this one's the hardest. This is where the situation is genuinely novel. The usual playbooks don't apply. You're figuring it out as you go. And I'm going to share a really good example of that when we get further into real life examples. I'll share a little bit about my journey through leading through the pandemic and how fun and exciting that experience was. But let's talk about why does this matter? And it matters because the mistake leaders make is applying risk management tools. It's demanding more data, running more analysis to a situation that's actually in the ambiguity or deep uncertainty category. And that ends up creating paralysis. I've seen that time and time again as well, right? As we're trying to gather more data. I experienced this full force when we were trying to pull, for example, telework numbers and remote work numbers to find out how many participants and where did people live and how was that working and looking through this data, and we just kept pulling numbers and numbers, and every time the report would call for something a little bit different, and it ends up creating eventually a paralysis effect where now it's like you're just maneuvering, you're just managing, you're meeting the demands. What is it today? What report do you need now? Which way do we have to present that information? Taking the same data and packaging it different ways. It becomes this like vicious cycle of paralysis. And for ambiguity, the right tool is sense making. So you want to talk to people, you want to gather diverse perspectives, prototype ideas. And for deep uncertainty, the right tool is adaptability. So taking small reversible actions, learning fast, and adjusting. It was always a joke on my teams, but I always would say to my folks, and this was always my leadership model, if you're not adaptable and flexible, you don't want to work on my team. And they used to chuckle, and I was, it was kind of funny. It did become our tagline, but I was very serious about it because in the environment where I worked, there was a lot of uncertainty on a regular basis. We would be going, straight ahead, and then all of a sudden there was a sharp right turn or a sharp left turn, and you needed to be able to be adaptable and flexible. You needed to not get so attached to what you were doing on a daily basis or the actual outcome, because if you did that, you'd drive yourself crazy. I mean, your blood pressure would be through the roof because we were just moving and shifting so much. So you have to know which situation you're in before you can choose the right response. So that's the summary of this conversation right here, is that you really do need to understand the situation, and then it allows you to figure out how to forge ahead. So let's talk about engagement for a second. So this one, you don't have to drop anything in the chat. I think we've disabled the chat because we have so many folks on the call here today. But I want to just take a moment for reflection, for you to just jot down a few notes for yourself so that you can refer back to these. I want to pause here before we jump into solutions and do a quick reflection together. So I would like for you to think about a specific time, maybe fairly recent, when uncertainty hit your team hard. Not vaguely hard, but specifically hard. What was the biggest impact you saw? Was it morale? Was it productivity? Was there a shift in the trust factor? Did people start hoarding information? Did conflict spike? Did people stop taking initiative? Right? What were some of the things that happened so that you could really figure out like what just occurred in this space where we were going, things were great, and then all of a sudden we were hit with this uncertainty. Nobody knew what was going on. And so we can look at, the different types of uncertainty too, and the impact that can result from that. So, and we will hit this poll in just a moment, or you can go ahead and you can complete this poll now. But think about that time when uncertainty hit your team, and what was the biggest impact? Was it stress and anxiety? Was it reduced focus and innovation? Was it decision making slowing down? Was there confusion and chaos? So feel free after you jot down for your reflection to just take a moment and, select from one of those four categories. And then we'll see what everybody comes back and says. Okay, so stress and anxiety really shows up. Yeah, at 57%, and confusion and chaos comes in at 22%. Yeah. And then we see reduced focus and innovation and decision making slows. And it's kind of a spiral effect, right? It starts out as stress and anxiety, and then stress and anxiety can turn into confusion and chaos because you're not able to function and think and focus clearly. And then that spirals into reduced focus and innovation. And then as a result, we see that decision making slow. So it makes complete sense that there would be a spread across the board. And what you're describing is exactly the terrain we're going to map out. So keep your real examples in your mind as we go through the principles and tools. And the best way to make this stick is to connect it to something that you've actually lived through. So that's why I ask you to do the reflection. And I want to thank you for taking the time to, just go through that reflection and formulate your thoughts about an example of when uncertainty hit your team in a very big way. All right, so let's talk about core principles for leading effectively. So, in here, we're going to touch on resilience, adaptability, empathy, and emotional intelligence. So, these four traits form the foundation. Let me make each one concrete for your context. So, when we're talking about resilience, resilience isn't about never getting knocked down. So, that's always something I like to just kind of put out there because people just assume, oh my gosh, then you can't get knocked down. Nope, it's not about never getting knocked down. It's about your relationship with adversity. And one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader is model it openly. So when you share a challenge that you've navigated, maybe it's a project that failed, a decision that you got wrong, or you give your team permission, you're giving your team permission to be human in those moments, right? So it shows authenticity, it shows being real, and that matters enormously right now. Giving your team permission to be human will allow them the flexibility to be able to be creative, to operate outside of the box if they've got, some great creative ideas, because it allows them the opportunity to know that there aren't going to be these severe consequences if they don't get it right. Then adaptability, it means holding your mission constant while staying flexible on methods. There's a great Eisenhower line I want to share. It's plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So I just wanted to share that with you. And the act of planning builds your capacity to adapt. So even when the plan itself doesn't survive contact with reality, make sure you stay nimble on tactics and stay anchored to purpose because that's the key right there, being nimble on tactics and anchored to purpose. And then empathy requires you to remember that uncertainty lands differently on different people. So, a 30-year employee close to retirement and a first-year analyst are experiencing the same reorganization announcement in completely different ways. So, ask yourself, what does this specific uncertainty mean for this specific person? Oftentimes, I think it's very easy to get caught up in the minutia of the work and knowing, okay, this information came out, boom, boom, boom. We just have to walk through it. We have to apply it. But being able to really take that moment to say, okay, my team is comprised of, X, Y, and Z. As this example shared, a 30-year person, they're approaching this reorganization very different, right? They've been there, they've seen it, they've gone through this numerous times, possibly. This might be nothing new to them. It's just another drill, it's another day in the office. Whereas a first year analyst might be in complete and utter shock. They're like, oh my goodness, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my career? I'm just starting out. So being very aware of that and being able to hold space for that empathy is super important. And then emotional intelligence, right? It starts with you. You can't regulate your team's anxiety if you haven't regulated your own. So be sure to take a breath before the tough conversations. Check in with yourself. Your team reads your emotional state constantly, and your calm is genuinely contagious. So if you know, because you're human and you're going to hear things differently, right, than your team is, because you're going to be exposed to a different message than what's passed down to the workforce. So if you know that you're in a space where you're already, completely out of sorts, take that time to catch your breath, give yourself a moment, go clear your thoughts, make sure that you're calm and confident before you project whatever message you need to out onto the team because that energy is real and people are going to be able to feel that. So you want to make sure that you're exuding some confidence in your conversation. All right, so let's talk about core principles for leading effectively and the vision and communication aspect. So when structures are shifting, people need something stable to hold on to. That's what vision provides, right? Because, I mean, if you're going 100 miles an hour forward and you don't have a handlebar to hold on to, it can get a little overwhelming. So we want to make sure that we're giving people that opportunity to hold on to something solid. And it's the vision that does that. It gives people that forward thinking so that you're not stuck just here in the moment. So your mission would be your North Star. That doesn't change even when the org chart does. And reminding your team of the why is one of the most stabilizing things you can do. Not in a cheerleader way. We don't want you to go in there and do the rah rah and be fake and, be performative. What we're asking is that you're grounded and that in an honest way, you share things like, we don't know yet exactly what this reorganization means for us. What we do know is that we're still here to serve the public and protect this mission, support the people, and that doesn't change. So when you're able to deliver a message that's clear, saying, I'm not really sure how this is going to play out, but I do know that we're here for this purpose, and this purpose will continue to be served, and we'll do it with, honesty and integrity, all of the things that make the mission worth executing, right? And on communication, and I want to be direct here on this one, the research is unambiguous. Silence from leaders costs more than imperfect information. So when people don't get an explanation, they make one up. And they almost always imagine something worse than reality, right? We touched on that just a little bit ago. And I just really wanted to bring that conversation back up. The rumor mill gets going, the water cooler talk starts, and next thing you know, there are stories flying around, and it just creates this ripple effect that goes through the entire workforce. And so we want to minimize that and be very direct in the way we communicate. And again, if we don't have all the answers, that's okay. It's not a matter of knowing everything. It's a matter of being able to walk through and communicate what you do know, what you don't know, and what you're going to find out. So, the most powerful communication formula I know for uncertainty is simple. It's here's what I know. You just tell people what you know. Here's what I don't know yet, because you want to let individuals know you're not just throwing caution to the wind here. You're going to find out. I don't know yet, but I'm going to get those answers. And here's when I'll have more information. And that here's when I'll have more information lets people know that there's action behind the uncertainty and that your intention is to go and get clarification. So that's it. You don't need all the answers. You need to show up regularly. You need to be honest and close the information vacuum before fear fills it. Because again, fear will fill the spaces that are left empty. And you can minimize that. That is the one thing that you have the ability to have input and control over when the world feels completely crazy and uncertain. And even a 15-minute team huddle once a week during turbulent periods dramatically reduces rumors and speculation. Cadence here matters. So I can recall, for example, I would have weekly staff meetings with the staff. Sometimes there wasn't anything major to report. Sometimes there wasn't a meeting that was necessary, but they knew that we had a weekly meeting so they could bring their questions and concerns. But when things got really turbulent and really crazy, as they did because we had a lot of fast moving projects, we would sometimes meet and have impromptu meetings. And it would just be a matter of we just need a few minutes to connect. We need to talk about something that's happening. Here's the updates. And then we would move forward. So having the regular cadence is important. So you've got a battle rhythm established, and then knowing that sometimes you need to modify or alter that a little bit during times that call for a little more communication than normal. Okay, so let's talk about decision-making frameworks for a second. So leaders in uncertain environments need decision-making tools that work with incomplete information because that's all you ever have. So one I want to share with you today, I'm going to give you three others too that you can take a look into. We don't have time to go through all of them, but the one that I think really is helpful and would be most applicable is the OODA loop. This one comes from military strategist John Boyd, and it's brilliantly suited for volatile environments. So, what you're doing in this model is you're observing what's happening. So, that's the first O. Then you're orienting. This is the most important step where your experiences, your values, and situational awareness help you make sense of what you're seeing. Then you decide. So, that's the D. And then for the A, it's act. Then you loop back and you observe again. So the key insights, things like speed of orientation, that's your advantage. The faster you can make sense of a situation, the faster you can move. So the reversibility test, that's a practical everyday tool. So before you freeze on a decision, you're going to ask, if this turns out to be wrong, can we course correct? If yes, then you act now and you adjust later. You reserve your deliberation for decisions that are truly irreversible. So that's another key thing is to apply that reversibility test. And then remember the rule of good enough. In uncertainty, a good decision made quickly and adjusted as you learn is almost better than a perfect decision made too late. Okay, and a few additional models I'm just going to throw out there. You can absolutely look into these further. We won't cover them at length here. But if the OODA model is not resonating with you or the environment you're working in, there is the Cynefin framework. That's a decision-making framework that was developed by Dave Snowden at IBM. And this is a sense-making framework that helps leaders understand the context they're operating in to determine appropriate decision-making styles. What that model does is it divides problems into 5 domains that are based on relationships between cause and effect. So you're looking at clear, obvious, ordered, which is the cause and effect are known, best practices apply approach. So it's a sense, categorize, and respond approach. Then we have a complicated order where you're looking at cause and effect that requires analysis or expert knowledge. That's good practice applies. You're using sense, you're analyzing, and you're responding. And then there's the complex unordered, which is a cause and effect that can only be understood in hindsight. It's an emergent practice. So the approach is to probe, sense, and respond. And then chaotic, this is where things are unordered. There's no cause and effect relationship, novel practice. So the approach is act, sense, and respond. And then confusion and disorder. This is where the center domain representing when you don't know which of the other 4 domains you are in. Another model you can look at is the rapid decision model. Rapid is a framework developed by Bain and Company that clarifies rules and responsibilities in decision making, particularly in large organizations where decisions often stall. So it breaks down roles into the R stands for recommend, where you propose a course of action and gather inputs. The A stands for agree, must agree to recommendations. It has veto power. Perform, this is where you're responsible for executing the decision. Input provides information and expertise to the recommender, and decide the one person with the authority to make the final decision and commitment resources. And then the third model you could take a look at is the premortem. And this one's developed by Gary Klein. And the premortem is a strategic exercise where a team imagines that a project has already failed and then they work backwards to determine why. So those are just 3 additional. So again, that was the Cynefin framework, the rapid decision model, and the premortem. But for us, we're talking about the OODA loop, and that's the one that came from John Boyd. All right, so let's talk about core principles for leading effectively. Just I wanted to share this adaptability image. So adaptability consistently shows up as the single most important leadership predictor during disruption. And yet most of us were trained and rewarded in environments that valued consistency, process following, and predictability. The mental shift that unlocks adaptability is this. Your values and your mission are fixed. Your strategies and your plans are hypotheses. So when you treat your plans as experiments, things to test, learn from, and adjust, you stop experiencing every course correction as a failure and you start experiencing it as data. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And that's what we see here, right? Albert Einstein says the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. So the organizations that navigate uncertainty best are rarely the ones with the most sophisticated plan. They're the ones who can adapt the fastest when the plan meets reality. And what I'd like to just ask you, and again, you can jot this down in your notebook, is what's one plan or approach your team is holding on to that might need updating? Because that's something very worthwhile to explore. So, again, just really mull that one over. What is one plan or approach your team is holding on to that might need updating? Okay, so here we go with our next poll. We're going to check in again before we shift into practical tools. right? And so, which of the core principles resonates most with you? Resilience, adaptability, empathy, a vision. Because of everything we've covered, resilience, adaptability, empathy, communication, and vision, decision making under uncertainty. Which one, again, is going to help you personally to develop? Where do you want to personally develop or practice more, right? Of all of the ones we've covered. So I just want to know, what do you think are the areas that are going to be really important for you to focus? And there's no wrong answer here. The one that resonates for you is probably the one where you have the most room to grow. And it's almost certainly connected to the real situation that you've described in our earlier reflection exercise. So keep that answer in mind, because in our next session, we're going to go into practical strategies that are going to build all of those. But the one you flagged is where you'll find the highest personal return. So when we're looking at resilience, this is the bouncing back from setbacks. When we're looking at adaptability, we're looking at adjusting your approach while holding values. For empathy, we're looking at understanding how uncertainty lands different, communication and vision, keeping the team anchored to purpose, and decision making is acting well with incomplete information. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of adaptability here at 44%. And then the second is resilience, empathy coming in third, and vision coming in fourth, which is perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. Again, we're here to grow. So it's okay. Admitting these things is not a failure in any sense. It's just allowing you the opportunity to go a little further within and see where you have room for improvement. All right, so um, let's look at practical strategies and tools. We're going to shift from principles to practice. So knowing what you should do is valuable. Knowing how is what gets you through Monday morning, right? So you want to know the how. That's really important. And we're going to walk through 5 practical areas. We're going to talk about scenario planning, communication tactics, team management. We'll cover self-care and resources. And for each one, I'm going to give you something concrete, not a philosophy, but an actual tool that you can use. So as we go through these, be thinking about your specific situation. What's the uncertainty your team is living in right now? And which of these tools would make the biggest difference there? So let's go ahead and cover that. All right, so the 5 strategy areas. Let's first talk about scenario planning. You don't need a 40-page document. You can pick 2 or 3 plausible futures, sketch a 1 paragraph response to each, and identify your early decision triggers. So if X happens, we do Y, for example. This is going to prevent paralysis when change arrives because you've already thought it through. Then we have communication tactics. So we're going to use this formula. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. Here's when I'll have more information, right? We shared that a little earlier. So say it in your next team meeting this week. Give it a try, see how it works. And also consider starting each meeting with a 5-minute uncertainty check in. Ask the team, what's unclear for you right now? Just naming it out loud reduces its power. So that's a really powerful, very minor adjustment you can, make to your existing meetings. And it gives people an opportunity to express and share in a space where they feel safe and heard. Team management, give people agency in small areas when big things feel out of control. When people feel completely powerless, their morale collapses. When you find something, even something small, where your team has genuine ownership and visible influence, that makes a huge difference. And then also acknowledge the elephant in the room. Your team already knows things are uncertain. Naming it builds trust rather than undermining it. So you don't want to just sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not happening, because it's definitely happening. You really just want to name it. You want to build that trust, and you want to be very open, right? And then self-care for leaders. This is one non-negotiable, and I want to be direct about that one as well. You cannot sustain your team through uncertainty if you are depleted. That's huge. I'm going to say that again. You cannot sustain your team through uncertainty if you are depleted. You need to protect your recovery time. Even 10 minutes between back-to-back meetings can change your cognitive function. You have to allow yourself that moment, that pause, to be able to decompress, to shift from one gear to the next. I have spent my career on high gear, running from one crisis to the next, from meeting to meeting to meeting, everything being different topics, everything being confusing, uncertainty is run amok, and not allowing yourself that pause in between and that shift will inevitably create health issues. It will create frustrations. You'll become short-circuited. You might burn out. It can result in look like being short with your team members. So really give yourself that moment, that quick recharge. I know you can't go and sit in the corner for 30 minutes or just disappear, right? Because work is work and we have to get to the next topic. But we can take that moment to pause. And you can breathe if you need to. I always like to tell people try the 4-4-4 breath. You inhale for 4, you hold for 4, you exhale for 4, or the 4-7-8. You inhale for 4, you hold for 7, you exhale for 8. And that will allow you the opportunity to just kind of recalibrate your nervous system before you hop into the next conversation. Another thing you could do is find one or two trusted peers that you can debrief with regularly, right? It allows you to just kind of get it out, let it go, and sometimes hear it from a different perspective because you may be hearing things from your own lens. We all have our own patterns and triggers, and we hear it totally different than maybe it was meant to be delivered. And so having that trusted peer to have a conversation with or just kind of check in with can be really, really helpful. And then please, please, please stop performing certainty when you don't feel, right? If you don't feel like things are certain, that's okay. You don't have to carry on as if everything is great. Your team can tell, and the performance actually erodes the trust, which we mentioned a little earlier. But I think that was worth repeating because oftentimes leaders are taught or believe that they need to exude this level of confidence and clarity, even in the most confusing and chaotic situations. And as much as that may appear on the outside to look like strong leadership, it actually is going to erode the trust because as the team realizes, like, yeah, you don't really have a handle on this at all. It comes through, and that's going to break down that trust. So once that trust is gone, it's thin ice. So I want you to just really think about that and be cautious when you get into that space where you feel like you're having to perform certainty rather than just being authentic about what's really going on. And you can always reach back to that communication tactic that we mentioned. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. Here's when I'll have more information. And then I would like to leave you with some resources too, because I'm all about the reading. It's all about expanding your toolkit, making sure you have additional viewpoints and knowledge that you can carry with you. So if you haven't read it, the book Dare to Lead by Brene Brown is a wonderful one. Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. And of course, our Graduate School USA leadership courses are all excellent starting points to help you as you're trying to build this toolbox and continue to round out your strategies and tools. All right, so let's go on to, we've got another reflection here. So let's take a moment to reflect on the practical strategies and tools we just covered. So scenario planning, communication tactics, team management, self-care for leaders, and resources. Of the strategies that we've just covered, what is one strategy that you're going to try this week? Because I don't want to just leave you hanging here. I don't want to just talk and share all these great tools and then you walk away and say that was lovely information. I want to know what you genuinely think you want to incorporate this week as you go into starting, or next week as you go into starting your next week. So, again, you've got scenario planning, communication tactics, team management, self care, and resources. So, let's see what we have here for responses. This one's going to be fun. I have an idea of which one should pop up as number one, but I'll be curious to see the results. And the drum roll. And it's exactly as I anticipated. All right. Self-care absolutely came out at 40%. To take a moment on this one because I'm really passionate about this. And I'm passionate about it because I spent most of my leadership journey not prioritizing self-care. So I am putting myself on display here and sharing that with you in a very vulnerable way because I think it's so necessary. When we go into these leadership positions, there is an expectation to perform, to get the job done. And if you don't, then somebody else will, right? There, it's that unspoken tone that happens. And so when we see that, we tend to try to jump. And as the bar gets higher, we jump higher, and then we keep jumping and we keep jumping. But what ends up happening when we don't take care of ourselves? Well, all of a sudden, we are operating from a space of survival mode instead of a space of being efficient and effective and creative and being able to have the flexibility to authentically lead. We see ourselves burning out. And when we burn out, all of a sudden we're not able to perform at the same level. And all of a sudden people are saying, wow, you were really good in the beginning. What happened? Right? You just see that slow decline. And so, focusing on the self care, taking time to go out and ground. If you have to step out of the office just to get into nature for a second, to be able to get some fresh air, change the scenery really quickly, just so you can clear your thoughts and mind, do the breathing, make sure you're getting enough rest, right? One of the main things I've seen it time and time again, especially when there's uncertainty in the leadership space, sleep gets interrupted because you're constantly thinking, your mind is racing. So I'll throw a couple of my little health and wellness tools your way. An hour before bed, turn down the lights. Make sure that you're helping your circadian rhythm to realize it's time to wind down. Don't look at that phone before bed. I'm guilty of it. I've done it, but it's a horrible habit to be looking at the phone, checking your emails. You see that email from the boss or from a team member that's got something going on, and now you can't sleep right away because you're thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to tackle this issue? So make that space, that hour before bed, sacred so that your body has a chance to wind down, so that you can get solid rest and sleep, so that you can tackle all of those challenges in the morning. Because I'll be honest with you, they will still exist the next day. They're not going anywhere. So whether you deal with them and fret about them overnight, or you just address them with fresh perspective when you're well rested in the morning, your response is going to be completely different when you are able to do it from a place where you're well rested and thinking clearly. So making sure you prioritize sleep, hydration. Drink 50% of your body weight in water. I cannot tell you how many times people are operating from a space of being dehydrated. And when you're dehydrated, you're not going to be your best self. You're not going to have the stamina to withstand some of those uncertainties that are being thrown at you. So really protect your self-care space, have a routine. Journals are wonderful, starting your morning with gratitude, ending your day with a reflection journal to see how the day went, what went well, what didn't go well, what would you or could you do differently going forward? Because again, as you're going through uncertainty, you're focusing a lot on your team and making sure the work is getting done, and you need to make sure somebody is checking in on you as well. So that is the role there, for that portion of my of my little soapbox of self-care. So I feel like we've sufficiently covered that now. Communication tactics, absolutely. Something that came in at 29%, that came in as our second runner. When it comes to communication tactics, it is super easy to get caught up in the chaos of everything that's happening in an uncertain situation. And sometimes it's not that we don't want to communicate. Maybe we've been told we can't share certain information, or perhaps we've gone into a space where we thought we communicated, but we didn't. But we've heard it so many times because we've been in so many meetings or so many circles that it was an afterthought, not intentional afterthought, but it may have been that we just completely thought we covered this and we didn't, because so many things are moving so quickly. So being able to kind of jot down, have your meeting minutes, or even, paraphrasing what you covered in a meeting so you can remember which circle you've had which conversations, can be extremely helpful. And then scenario planning came in third at 13%. And that's a really great one because oftentimes we just kind of forge ahead. This is the way we're doing it. And there isn't that time to build in that scenario planning. So I think that's another great one. Team management and came in at 6%, and then resources at 5. Those didn't seem to be as much of a struggle. And that's great. So again, just kind of try to blend all of these together, but find that one, which apparently seems to be self-care, that needs your absolute attention, and place that attention there, because you'll be amazed when you do put a little effort into that space, how you show up differently and how you yourself can manage the uncertainty, which then therefore is going to project out completely differently to your team. All right, enough on self-care. Thanks for letting me be on my soapbox. All right, so let's talk about some real world examples. I want to share this with you here. So let me share the Satya Nadella story because I think it's one of the best modern examples of these principles and actions. So, when Nadella became CEO of Microsoft in 2014, the company was in a genuine strategic crisis. Its core business was being disrupted, the internal culture was deeply dysfunctional, and they had stack ranking had created a competitive, fear-driven environment, and the path forward was genuinely unclear. So, what Nadella didn't do, he didn't project false confidence. He didn't pretend to have a master plan. What he did do is he anchored the entire organization to a single clear purpose to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And he modeled the growth mindset he was asking others to adopt, publicly acknowledging his own learning curve and mistakes. And during the pandemic in 2020, Microsoft had to scale its cloud infrastructure at a pace that had never been attempted before, making major decisions daily with incomplete information. So Nadella ended up, he later said the team was essentially using the OODA loop. So that OODA loop that we talked about a little earlier, the observe, the orient, the act, the learn in real time, is what he was applying as his model, which I thought was pretty awesome. So I wanted to share that because it was a very applicable example. And so the lesson isn't to be Satya Nadella. The lesson is purpose is more stabilizing than certainty. You don't have to have all the answers. You have to know what you're trying to accomplish. You have to do things like what he did. He established that clear purpose, and that's what really propelled people forward and allowed them to stay focused while they were going through this really uncertain period of time. And I want to take a moment to share a personal example along my leadership journey as well, because I want to give you a federal example also. So, in March of 2020, this is when the work world as we knew it forever shifted. As the pandemic emerged, uncertainty made its way through the workplace like wildfire. One day we were in the office, the next we were telling people to pack up their things and go home. Yes, go home, but position yourself to work from home. There were no figure it out as we go moments. That there were more, excuse me, figure it out as you go moments than I could even cover in this discussion, right? But I want to highlight a few. So some of those that were faced were telework without an end date in sight. Go home, but I don't know when you're coming back. Establish a remote work program that would lend itself to be changing and shifting dynamics and guidance that was resulting from the pandemic. There was conflicting vaccine guidance coming out. There was operating guidance for the workforce coming out. There were new policies. There was new technology because now we needed to figure out how to operate out of the office but still collaborate. So all of a sudden, everybody's doing Teams meetings and everything's gone virtual. Then, of course, there were the aspects of the human element, which we had individuals who were getting sick, family members, people passing away. There was a lot of stuff going on. So, you get my point. The theme here is uncertainty on top of uncertainty on top of more uncertainty. And as a leader, I too felt like I was not on level ground. I didn't know whether I was coming or going, what each day was going to bring, and how it was going to impact me or the team that I led. And I was charged with leading policy initiatives for the agency and working on DoD work groups. And at the same time, telework and remote work programs were realigned to my branch. And there was a learning curve on all of this since they were previously not under my purview. But even more so because the remote work program was going to be a brand new program that required case studies, establishing the program, rolling it out, training, and so on. So, all while keeping the mission going, these were very real things that were happening to the members of my team, the leadership in the agency, and the workforce at large. And all of the strategies I mentioned here today were tremendously helpful in navigating this rocky terrain. So, for example, scenario planning was a key contributor to the formulation of our remote work program development. We had scenario A, B, and C, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And we played each of them out side by side. If this happens, this could happen, and that could happen. What are the wins? What are the consequences? Communication with my team and the workforce was paramount. I did find that communicating what I did know, what I didn't know, and what I would find out and share was far more reaching than silence. I held regular weekly meetings. I would call impromptu meetings when information became available, so the latest and greatest was shared before it had time to hit the rumor mill. When it came to team management, that was another key addition. finding ways to engage the team on areas we felt we had areas of control. This allowed the team to get their footing even when it felt like we were in an earthquake. Self care for self and the team was huge. I encouraged attending the OPM mindfulness sessions that were being offered during lunch hours. I encouraged the team to participate in the wellness program and take their wellness hour when the mission would allow, because we did have a wellness program. And so that was huge. I encouraged using their leave when they felt they needed a little extra R&R, and the health and safety of the team with the virus spreading was at the top of the list. So if people needed to take that sick leave, we actually, really we pushed that people would take the leave and the time they needed to make sure that they were well. Even though they were remote working, still, if people were ill, they needed that space and that recovery. Resources were also factored in. We shared content and information that was beneficial to navigating this space, whether it was the employee assistance program, literature, or webinars that were helping support to just kind of, keep everyone grounded. So, in summary, this was, an extreme example of what uncertainty could look like on a large scale. Not sure that I'll experience something like that again in my lifetime, but I don't know. Things are constantly shifting. But in the moments when we feel everything is beyond our control, beyond our ability to comprehend, reaching for the practical strategies and tools can provide the actionable process that's going to allow you to find your footing as you're navigating your way through the sea of uncertainty. So, all you need is a few small actions, and they will make a world of difference as to how you walk through and come out of uncertainty. Because one thing is for certain, in these moments where it feels like the world is caving in, the sun will rise and it's going to set. Nothing is going to last forever. It's just about staying focused, being calm, and forging ahead so that you can make it to the other side. All right, so let's talk about some key takeaways here. As we start to bring this all together, I want to name three things I most hope you carry out of today. Act early. The cost of waiting for certainty is almost always higher than the cost of adjusting an imperfect early decision. Small reversible actions taken now will beat paralysis every time. Learn from failures genuinely, not in a lessons learned checkbox kind of way, because I know we love our lessons learned, especially in the government, but by creating a culture where honest debriefs are normal and non threatening. When something doesn't work, your team should be able to say so without fear. That's how you get smarter faster. So, allowing that space for those conversations. Involve your team in solutions. The leaders who navigate uncertainty best are not necessarily the ones with the best individual judgment. They're the ones who mobilize the collective intelligence around them. The people on your team see things that you don't. So make sure you use that. That is an advantage. And here's a bonus one because I feel strongly about it. Communicate early and often. Silence, as we mentioned, costs more than imperfect information. Show up, be honest, and close the vacuum before the fear fills it. All right, let me give you something concrete to walk out with today. This week, pick just one of these, not all of them, one, because I want you to be able to really integrate it and start in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. So, option one, schedule a 15-minute uncertainty check with your team. Just ask, as we mentioned, what's feeling unclear right now and listen without fixing. Okay. Don't immediately respond. Listen, hear that information. Option two, draft a one-page scenario plan for the most pressing uncertainty your team is facing, two or three plausible futures, one paragraph of responses each. Or option three, send a here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's what I'll find out by message to your team about something that's currently ambiguous for them. Any of these done consistently over the next few weeks will make a real difference. For deeper development, I'd point you to Dare to Lead, by Brene Brown for the courage and vulnerability piece, Thinking in Bets by Annie Dukes for decision making and under uncertainty, and graduate school leadership programs for structured federal focused development. And for daily practice, try an uncertainty journal, 5 minutes a day, three questions. What's uncertain right now? What's actually in my control? And what's my next step? It sounds simple, but it's remarkably grounding. All right, and so let's hop over. I'm not sure if we have enough time for questions, but I will pop in the chat really quick if you have any. I genuinely want to hear what's on your mind, what you came up for you today, what felt relevant or unclear, and any specific situations you're navigating. There are no wrong answers here. So if you have something you want to share, feel free to do it. And as we wrap up, I just want to thank you all for your time, your participation, and your honesty today. I know some of you may need to drop off to get to other meetings because I've filled your hour. So I just want to conclude by telling you that leading through uncertainty is genuinely hard work. It asks you to stay steady when you don't feel steady, to communicate when you don't have all the answers, and to take care of your team while also taking care of yourself. The fact that you're investing in your leadership during one of the more turbulent periods in federal service says a lot about who you are. So take care of yourselves, take care of your teams, and remember, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep showing up. And thank you all again for your time today. And I don't see any questions in the chat right now. So, um, again, thank you all for joining. And I hope to see you in future webinars and hope to see you in some of our courses here at the Grad School USA.